I think most people are in. Last day, all of yesterday, particularly in the evening, we had a chance to meet many of you. Some new faces for us, but many familiar faces. And there was one question which was coming up from many people who were not so acquainted with NIIT and its many activities. Last year, of course, Vijay did talk about many things we do, and this time as well. But we just thought that may be good to take this few minutes to have an open session question that you may have. Because just last year we've been through a demerger of the two entities. So some of you are familiar with that, some may not be so familiar, as I sensed. And then, of course, there were many who said we didn't know this about, you guys do this, we didn't know. So Vijay created a sentence many years ago which said that NIIT is a well-kept secret. So we thought it's time we talk a bit more and get people familiar. So I'll take a few minutes just to very quickly run down memory lane, which I keep doing in spite of being told that it's not important. But I just think we all need to know where we come from. And then I'll ask Vijay to talk for a few minutes on the demerger process that happened, the reason, rationale, and Sapnesh to talk very briefly on the NLSL, strategy and direction, and then we'll open it for questions. So Genesis goes back to December of '81 when we formed the company. And the mission was to bring people and computers together. That was a time when computers were getting made, but talent was a gap. So we got into that activity. Quite rapidly, I think the demand built up. We were fortunate. I think timing is important. It was a closed economy. There weren't too many options. We led from the front by using technology to train people because there were no trainers. There were no people in the first place. So if it's whoever were there, even the IITs, the professors were working for TCS and so on, trying to fill the gap. So we got busy with that. We were pushed to use technologies. We've used every possible technology. We built many in this period of time. And the 80s went into growing our reach. But the 80s also created a demand, in a sense, from companies who were wanting to get into computerization seriously, a leadership-led demand. I think yesterday I talked about the fact that this moment reminds me more of the mid-80s than anything else in between, because there's something new happening which is exciting a large number of people. It's also the period when we got pulled into doing corporate training, then training for the leadership team, and then the leaders saying, well, it's very easy for you to talk and go away. Build us a roadmap. And we designed a 6-month consulting assignment, which we called CRIS Plan, which is Critical Information System Planning, which was the roadmap for companies to start from where they were to reach a point where they were building critical mass and moving ahead and getting an IT structure and hiring EDP managers then and so on. And doing a vast amount of education to enable organization to get onto the momentum. And then that built itself quite well in the second half of the 80s. I would say a few hundred of the leading companies, we did their IS plans, information system plans. And the 90s happened. All of us know that that was a golden era for everybody. And for us, it also grew our software business. So from consulting, we were pulled into saying, okay, now put it together. It's easy to build a plan. But it's 1991 when we opened our one office in Atlanta and one in Singapore. We had no intentions of going global till 1991 because that's the time, if you remember, the country was bankrupt and we were told to export or perish. So we took our expertise to these two regions. IBM, interestingly, we went to do a computer-based training project. IBM was the biggest trainer till much later also, but that time they had the largest number of courses of 2 days, 5 days, all stand-up courses. And they were keen to see how they could be put onto the computer. So we had an instructional software exports entity, which was getting their programs either in video recorded sessions or courseware, and we were converting that into CBT and shipping it back to them. So the 90s in the US became a period where we were doing some software work on client server. Sun Microsystems was a customer. New technologies like Sybase, we were using that in India and marketing that in India. So the US market for us moved into building content and so on for the IT sector. And by the peak, I think some 30 some out of 50 top IT companies from IBM downwards. We were building content, we were running training programs, we were doing many things for them, project at a time. And on the India side, we had started building the software factories. That was our concept of doing things remotely. All in new technologies. We weren't in Y2K, we weren't in the old technology, so .com we drove. And the businesses grew very well, both of them. And then we had a division for software. We went public in 92. Our shareholders were confused about, are we a software company? Are we a training company? What are we? So the joke was, we said, if you remember the Superman joke, is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Superman. So we thought we were Superman. But we had to give our shareholders visibility into our two businesses. And by the end of the 90s, they were large enough. So we demerged the software business and called it NIIT Technologies. It was already a division. And the intent, even early on, because for us, as I keep saying, software was the most profitable distraction we had. Built a very good business. We enjoyed it. But that's not what we had set out to do with the mission of bringing people and computers together. By then, in the international business, which Sapnesh is the architect of, we had started building content and training people not just on IT. It started as only IT, using IT. So the content is IT and the form is also IT, delivery. But then we got into projects where we were doing non-IT subjects using IT platforms. And that's the period when we really invested time in understanding how learning happens. We've never used the word teaching in our 42 years. We've always talked about learning. Emphasis on the learner, not on the delivery process. And you see symptoms of that when you see the work we do in learning science and the kind of the work that's going on. So 2004 was when NIIT Tech was formed, grew quite well. And while we had an intent to exit it fully, but it took another 15 years. So 2019, we exited the software business. Now it's called Coforge, and it's doing very well. And the learning business has been growing. So the India model of delivery through learning centers peaked around 2005 or 6, after which engineering colleges started. People didn't have to spend 2 years. Our international business was growing, the software business was growing. So the domestic B2C business was kind of scaling down, looking at the new demand. But then we were venturing into banking training. 2006, Mr. Kamath talked about it, which we do a lot now. So we work with the IT companies. So we used to worry about B2B, B2C till we said, look, that's a hypothetical model, because for many of the organizations, we work in bringing the talent, but we also do upskilling. So it's a composite kind of solution that we try to do for companies on their talent. And the funds that came from NIIT Tech were used by us founders to fund a university, which is a not-for-profit, but were set aside for NIIT Limited to fuel the growth of both these activities. The international activity, which became a very interesting business, which we call managed training services. I'll ask Sapnesh to speak a little on that. But before that, Vijay, if you could spend a minute talking about the demerger and the rationale, that'd be helpful.
Most of you are familiar with what NIIT is a household name, or was a household name. Now the parents' room, it is still well known, but in the children's room, it may not be as well known. But that was the training centers that we used to have. At peak, we had 1,220 training centers. And then over a period of time, we found that as we added more and more training, which was done virtually, and we were doing it with careful doses because we were very, very concerned about the end outcome, the impact of the training center started reducing. And we were therefore planning a transition to move to a digital format, but fully digital, hybrid, all those were questions. And in 2020 came COVID, which gave us a big push to take a very big decision. And in 1 week's time, we took a decision that we will shut down all training centers, because in any case, the country was shut down, and that was a fixed expenditure. But we also had 26,000 students on rolls on that day. We located each and every student over the next 3 years and completed their programs so that they got value for whatever they had registered for. There are still 271 students whom we haven't found out of those 26,000. They may have gone away, but they're not even responding. But we were committing to complete this process so that when we start with the new business model, we are not having any backlog to fill up. While this was happening, we noticed that the two parts of the activity, this business which Sapnesh actually conceived in 2008, had become reasonably strong, which is called managed training services. I'll ask him to talk more about it. But enough to say that it uses all the core competencies that NIIT built before this business got launched. But after that, it has contributed substantially to building newer competencies for NIIT. So we'll talk about that. This was on a growth path. We were number 7, and we were wanting to be amongst the number 5, we were number 7 and wanted to be in the top 5, and then top 3. And one day, of course, there's the vision of also being the largest in this managed training services business, which Sapnesh will talk about. But this was on a growth trajectory, and stable business, growing fast, and had needs for capital. On the other hand, the other business, which was, as I said, we shut down the centers and we reworked our enterprise go-to-market strategy, which Bimal drove, and that was maturing. But that business is an investment cycle. This is in a harvesting cycle in many ways, growth and harvesting cycle. So our board felt that when capital allocation decisions get taken, the businesses have different growth trajectories. The businesses have different capital needs. Many times the capital needs may conflict with each other. So if there is X amount of capital it has to be allocated, then it will obviously support the one which appears more attractive. And also it gives a confusing signal, because one part of the business is in investment, one part is in a growth. So the average, you add up the two, the average is not giving a correct picture of the business. And we felt that while there were common competencies and common capabilities, the organization was mature enough, and people in the organization, having worked in both sides many times, were mature enough now to actually chart their independent paths. Each of the businesses had their own future trajectories. In fact, the NIIT Limited, the India-based business, India and emerging markets business, actually has a higher or faster growth trajectory as we go forward. Why? Because that has to start from very small to become large enough. And the other one is growing at a steady rate. Of course, there is an acceleration in that as well. So keeping these two in mind, it was felt that if these two businesses could exist as separate companies. So this process started in January 22. Whatever regulatory mechanism there is, the process ended in May of 2023. As I mentioned yesterday, NIIT MTS, or NIIT Learning Systems Limited, which is the formal name of the company, got listed on 8th of August. So since then, we are running two separate businesses, two separate listed companies. Sapnesh is the CEO of NIIT Learning Systems Limited, but he's also associated with NIIT Limited as a non-executive director, and therefore provides oversight and guidance to the teams here, since this is also a business that he was looking after. And over a period of time, over the period of transition, which is in 18 months, we would create independent elements of the business. But right now, since we are in the transition period, there are still many, many things which are common. Technology, for example, we are using a common platform, and that's in agreement, so that we can both take advantage of that is NIIT Limited as well as NIIT Learning Systems Limited. Both companies can take advantage of the benefits of new developments which take place in each. This morning, the Gen AI demo that you saw was actually an NIIT Learning Systems demo. But the AI factory is available to both, because that is using the common capabilities that we have. And therefore, what Shivaji showed you was from NIIT Limited, and what Greg and Brandon showed you were from NIIT Learning Systems. Both were leveraging the AI factory. So there are areas in which the two companies work together, and I think that creates value for our customers. Our working or very closely with global banks gives us an opportunity to bring that knowledge, expertise, experiences onto our domestic customers. Our working with Indian GSIs and GCCs gives us an opportunity to work with global customers and pitch to them and tell them how we can make a difference to their lives. So I think right now it's a fairly symbiotic relationship, and we believe through this transition, the two companies will emerge stronger. On the charts, they are already appearing stronger, but then charts are not those are scoreboards. I think the real game is where we have to see the difference. So that's what I would like to say, if there is anything, and then I'll hand over to Sapnesh to talk about the managed training service.
Thanks, Vijay. Like you pointed out, managed training services was born in 2008, I guess out of an existential crisis. And in this instance, the crisis prompted us to reinvent ourselves, and we actually were able to reinvent ourselves into managed training services. I still remember Ed Trolley's book that Vijay referred to yesterday. He wrote a book. He worked with us for a number of years. He joined us around that time, and his book was Running Training Like a Business. And I remember talking to chief learning officers or CHROs, and I would ask them, why do you do training? What do you get out of training? How does your top management look at training? And how do you justify your expense towards training? And they would always give me philosophical answers to that question. They would say, we do it because it's the right thing to do. Now, when you say it's the right thing to do, you can't argue against it, right? But so I said, I know when you take it to your CEO, they would look at the right thing to do and maybe put it as part of the CSR budget, because, community service is a good thing to do. Is that how you look at your budget, or do you get budget because you produce outcomes? And every time I said that, they would change the subject to the weather. They would say, the weather outside is really good. Why don't we go outside and have a cup of coffee? And so I felt that there was a conversation, which was a hard conversation, that most learning organizations were avoiding. And we felt that maybe there is an opportunity there. And we felt that before we figure out what the opportunity is, let's figure out what's the mountain that we have to climb, and is the view going to be worth the climb? So we started working at figuring out, why is it that L&D often was trying to evade the issue of creating value, and by saying that we are doing it because it's the right thing to do. And we found out that they were not evading the issue. It was because they had a capacity and they had to deploy that capacity. And so because of that, they were actually becoming less agile and not able to adapt. They had trainers, they had designers, they had people who could run training. But the business was changing rapidly. So if I have trainers who can teach derivatives, but tomorrow if the business moves away from derivatives into something else, I can still teach you derivatives like no one else can, but nobody wants to learn derivatives. So what am I going to do? Keep doing the same thing over and over again. And as organizations did that,
the training that was being delivered stopped being relevant. And so we said that maybe what we can do is bring relevance back into training, create outcomes that could be measured, be able to provide the organization and a real answer to why do you want to do training rather than because it's just good, right thing to do. And that's how Managed Training Services was born. We said that we will actually take the responsibility of running your training as a business and actually provide business outcomes. That's worked out well so far. We have 85 customers. Some of the largest banks are our customers. Some of the largest energy companies are our customers. Several of the big four are our customers. We have the big airplane manufacturers as our customers. So we have now a diversified set of customers. And as Vijay pointed out, we bring to them all the competencies that NIIT has and help them use these competencies so that they can deliver training that creates value. And the value that they are able to manage, value that they are able to report, and value that they are able to justify to their management that makes the investment worth it. In doing so, we try to stay ahead of the game. Like Vijay pointed out, we've done a lot of work and investment towards figuring out how to use AI to make training more efficient and effectiveness. And that's sort of the pioneering spirit of NIIT that NIIT MTS has inherited, where if there is an opportunity, for example, when I talked to you about what the CHRO said, that he said, we just can't train relationship managers. And I said to him that there will be a day when we can actually effectively train them. And we take these challenges seriously, we invest in them, and we try to solve problems so that they can create value for our customers. I could go on for a long time, but let me give it back to you, Raj.
Yeah, so now there are two companies, NIIT Limited, like to call it the parent in that sense. And as Vijay explained, Sapnesh is on both the boards. He's the CEO of NLSL. And at this moment, I do want to introduce one person who's been floating around. Some of you met him, who is going to be the CEO of NIIT Limited with effect from 1st of July. So Pankaj, if you could just stand and just let people see you so you can... he's, what do you call it? What duty is this? Duty-free time.
Yeah, he's in his duty-free period right now.
But we didn't want him to miss this opportunity. Otherwise, he formally joins 1st of July. So we said this opportunity will come after a year. At least you should catch up with people, shake hand, and then tell them you'll meet them later, because meeting so many of you together is a real opportunity. So Pankaj is an IMC 98. Interestingly, spent first 2 years in NIIT. And if some of you read about the Hole in the Wall project, he was in my office, but working with Dr. Sugata Mitra. After which he spent about 5 years in the brief stint of a year, the 5 years in UK. And he was doing business development for Tata Interactive. Some of you know that they were also in learning. Came back, worked at Accenture on as a solution architect, worked on a facility, looked after a facility, and then spent the next 12 years in Amazon. First the building product categories, and then looking after Cloudtail, and then their own JV called Prion. And then after that, the last 2 years at a company called Etsy, ETSY. Many people are familiar. I was not so familiar. I'm not a e-com purchaser, but it's a US-based company. I think it's what, 13 billion in GMV. But they had, so he was heading the India operation, so Etsy only deals with handmade products. So India was a very big source, and he was meant to build out both, but then they chose just to stay with India as a source, and he felt that was had to do something more exciting. And then over the last few weeks, we've been in conversation. And we just concluded that just before this, it was early, but we didn't want him to miss this opportunity. So he may not be able to answer any questions about NIIT at this time. So please don't ask him that. But I would like him to reach out to all of you, because soon he would be taking responsibility for what all the teams do. So with that, I want to open it up for Q&A. We have a few minutes, about 5 minutes.
I'll just add, I think with this discussion, we just opened the opportunity that in his duty-free period, we have to get him ready to start fulfilling his duty. And you are part of his induction program. So each one of you should talk to him about your experiences with NIIT. And then hopefully when he takes up, then you will be able to get more out of NIIT.
So, Bimal, how many minutes? More? 5 minutes? Less? At best. Okay, so 2 or 3 questions very quickly if anyone has. Of course, we are around tonight, tomorrow. But if anybody has a question, then about corporation, corporate strategy, any of those, this is a good time. Yes, there's a question right there, the way.
So I think, Rajendra, I must first say that when I hear about NIIT as a name, as a brand, I must say that the IT revolution, especially when it comes to training, that has been brought in by NIIT. So kudos and congratulations to you and your entire team for that great work you have done so far. And I myself have known many youngsters who, in early 2000, I still recall, other than college graduates who done from ITCS, the second preference was always given to somebody who has done some GNIT or other courses. So immense role NIIT has, I must say that. Now my question is more around these 4, so you mentioned about StackRoute, RPS. So I understand as a corporate strategy, you have RPS, like RPS is now subsidiary company of NIIT, right? So StackRoute is also doing similar thing what RPS was doing, and RPS came in somewhere around 2007. That's what I understand, and NIIT is a brand name already. So is it a corporate strategy to kind of, because RPS was having good market share of running corporate trainings for different clients, that was primary reason for which this got acquired by NIIT? Or there's some other strategic reason? Just out of curiosity, I'm asking this question. I'm not sure whether it is right or wrong, but I would request if you can help me with that.
Okay, you want to give it a shot? Or
But before that, let me just take 30 seconds to go forward from the brand NIIT.
Sure.
So we have reworked the mission and the vision statement for NIIT Limited. So we started with IT, then we went into financial services. So now we've generalized to say that our mission is to help people realize their true potential. Help people realize their true potential. That's really what we have been doing in specific areas. Now we are broad basing the areas. That's one. And the vision which we see for ourselves, may sound a little arrogant, is we want to be the talent builders for the nation. Loud as it may sound. So on the horizon, we are looking at, we saw IT 40 years ago, we saw banking 20 years ago, private sector at least. So we have been spending time to understand what are the next few waves of talent building for us, which this country is focused on. So you'll hear more about that as we go forward. But right now, Vijay, you want Sapnesh?
Sure. I'll start with StackRoute and then talk a little bit about RPS and how you could think of them as together. StackRoute was born out of the need for creating full stack developers. Still remember full stack developers? There's still a desperate shortage for full stack developers. And this is when digital transformation was a big deal. Not that we've achieved a huge part in terms of digital transformation. There's still lots of organizations who are still in the adoption phase for digital transformation. But about 2017, 2016, GSIs in India had started taking on the role of enabling their customers to achieve digital transformation. And one of the things that they felt was a stumbling block in being able to do that was the availability of full stack developers. They had armies of developers, but those armies could not get deployed to, for example, create sticky websites that could sell products or build products for them. Organizations were moving away from providing big 3-inch binders to organizations as requirements. And what would you provide? Organizations were giving requirements by saying, I want to improve the efficiency of my aircraft engines. That was the requirement. It didn't need a 3-ring binder, it needed a sentence. And GSIs wanted to convert those requirements into products that could help their customers either to improve efficiencies or grow market or improve revenue. And at that point, StackRoot was born with the mission to ensure that they would enable GSIs to succeed in enabling their customers achieve digital transformation. And several of you here, we worked with on that mission over the last several years. As StackRoot has grown, so has their mission. And they've gone beyond just working on full stack developers to work on architects, to work on how organizations can move their applications to the cloud, DevOps, DevSecOps, and a number of things that I actually don't understand. But their focus has been to help digital enablers achieve digital transformation for their customers. Most of their customers so far have been GSIs for whom they've been a great partner. And as you think about training and as you think about full stack developers training, most people who join an organization go through training in 2 or 3 tranches. The first tranche is when you get into an organization. You're straight out of college, or at least are seen as a person who has no clue. You might feel that you have a lot of skills, but you're seen as a person who has no clue. So you're put into an onboarding training. And often you get into that onboarding training because you have really nothing else to do. Nobody wants to make you a part of your team. I think what StackRoot did was converted the onboarding training that was seen as a waste of time by many people into training that actually could produce day one ready professionals who people would want in their teams. So that was one transformation they did. There is a second opportunity for a person in their corporate journey where their skills start degrading in value. They're not current anymore. They're not as valuable to their customers that they used to be. And as organizations started figuring out that customers did not need legions of people, but they need highly skilled individuals to solve their problems, StackRoot started moving up the chain and say, okay, how can we reskill people from, say, COBOL programming into a full stack developer? Or how can you help an architect become more relevant to their customers? So what StackRoot has focused on is deep learning at different pivotal points in a person's journey in an organization, whether at the start of the journey or at the midpoint of the journey or at the pinnacle of the journey. Now, if you look at these 3 points, they are connected through steps that a person gets, which are incremental in nature. So it's not that when a person joins an organization, the first year the guy goes for 6 months of training, and after that the guy gets no training at all, and 6 years later the guy goes for another month of training. A lot of times this person needs incremental training so that they stay relevant for the business. And when we looked at how RPS was set up, that's exactly what they were doing. RPS was engaged with a number of GSIs as well as GCCs where if they were moving from a version of technology to another, or they were moving to the cloud, or they were going to Azure, or they were adopting a way of addressing cybersecurity, RPS could enable them both with training as well as certification so that they could achieve their goals. And so the way I would think about it as you're formulating what does StackRoot do versus what RPS does, RPS is very, very good at making sure that you stay relevant with change in technology. What StackRoot does really, really well is to enable you to adopt technology, adopt skills that will keep you current, that will create value over a long period of time. To me, there are two sides of the same coin. One comes in short bursts and keeps you current. The other one makes step changes. I don't know if I clarified or confused you more.
So actually, they are both organizations are fairly complementary in the solutions that they offer. If you were to draw a Venn diagram, there will be a small sliver which will be common, but I think the sum of the two is actually much, much more than what individually they can offer. So we internally call this, they are 1 + 1 not equal to 2, they are 1 + 1 equal to 11. Because this range of services that they offer provides a totality of experience, and there are a number of joint endeavors they do, work together and go to the clients.